Looking for magic cards? At flipsidegaming.com you can now use the promo code LVD to get a 10% discount on orders over $10 while supporting the channel at the same time. Hello and welcome to another episode of Wacky Wednesday, a weekly series where we explore wacky deck ideas in both Standard and Modern, and this week we're taking a look at Abzan Aristocrats in Modern, a green, black and white creature deck that tries to sacrifice a whole bunch of creatures for value and eventually drain the opponent out with cards like Blood Artist or Zulaport Cutthroat, and can also bring back a whole bunch of creatures from the graveyard with Return to the Ranks. So it's kind of a graveyard sacrifice creature based deck. And the name refers to the card Cartel Aristocrat, which was part of the original Aristocrats deck in Standard that also featured cards like Doom Traveler, so the name kind of stuck. Even if we wouldn't be running the one of Cartel Aristocrat, you could still name the deck Aristocrats. And of course Abzan refers to the 3-color combination, and we also happen to have one of those Abzan cards in our deck, Abzan Ascendancy, which synergizes quite nicely in our deck. So let's take a look at the entire deck list, starting out with our 1-drops, where we have 4 copies of Doom Traveler, a 1-mana 1/1 human soldier, that when the Doom Traveler dies, we get to make a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. So a nice bit of value if we can sacrifice Doom Traveler, and then maybe even later get it back from the graveyard. Then a new addition from M19 is Stitcher Supplier, 1-mana 1/1 zombie. When the Supplier enters the battlefield or dies, put the top 3 cards from our library into our graveyard, so helps us fuel the graveyard for a Return to the Ranks. Then we have our premier sacrifice outlet in Viscera Seer, a 1-mana 1/1 vampire wizard. We can sacrifice a creature at any time to scry 1. So the scry 1 helps us dig for those combo pieces like the Return to the Ranks, which we'll get to in a second, and helps us smooth out our draws while giving us a way to sacrifice our creatures, which will then trigger cards like Blood Artist or Zulaport Cutthroat. And of course the deck provides a lot of food for the Viscera Seer through cards like the Doom Traveler and some of the cards we'll get to. And another one of those creatures is Blisterpod, a 1-mana 1/1 Eldrazi, and when Blisterpod dies we get to make a 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Scion creature token that we can sacrifice to make 1 colorless mana, and it's actually very useful that we can sacrifice a Scion by itself, so if we're missing a sacrifice outlet we can still trigger cards like Blood Artist or Zulaport Cutthroat, which are the next cards we're going to take a look at. We've got 4 copies of Blood Artist, a 2-mana 0/1 vampire. Whenever Blood Artist or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and we gain 1 life. So a great way to close out the game when we can sacrifice a whole bunch of creatures, especially if we have multiple copies of Blood Artist in play. And to complement Blood Artist, we have 2 copies of Zulaport Cutthroat, which says whenever Zulaport Cutthroat or another creature we control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and we gain 1 life. There is a pretty big difference between Blood Artist and Zulaport Cutthroat in that when an opponent's creature dies, the Blood Artist will still trigger, while Zulaport Cutthroat only triggers when one of our creatures dies. Next up we have 4 copies of Satyr Wayfinder, 2-mana 1/1. When a Wayfinder enters the battlefield, we can reveal the top 4 cards of our library. We can choose a land card from among those to put into our hand, and the rest goes into our graveyard. So the Wayfinder helps us fuel the graveyard, much like the Stitcher Supplier. Then we have 1 copy of Cartel Aristocrat to complement our 4 Viscera Seers as another sacrifice outlet, and whenever we sacrifice another creature, the Aristocrat gains protection from the color of our choice until end of turn, so we can kind of protect our Aristocrat from opposing spot removal spells by giving it protection in response to a removal spell, and that way we get to keep our sacrifice outlet alive, which can be useful. But generally speaking, the Scry 1 from Viscera Seer is more useful. Next up we have 2 copies of Tidehollow Sculler, 2-mana 2/2 zombie. When a Sculler enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals their hand, and we can choose a non-land card from it and exile that card. And when Tidehollow Sculler leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to its owner's hand. So it's kind of a temporary way of exiling a card from the opponent's hand, which is very useful against combo and control decks. But in this deck we can also do a neat little trick with our Tidehollow Sculler. If we want to permanently get rid of a card in the opponent's hand, we can sacrifice our Tidehollow Sculler with the trigger on the stack when it enters the battlefield, and that way the leaves the battlefield trigger will resolve first, making us return the exiled card to its owner's hand. But at that point we haven't exiled any cards from the opponent yet, and only afterwards does the first trigger resolve, which lets us exile a card from the opponent's hand, which means we get to exile it permanently. So that can be a nice thing we can do in this deck if we have a sacrifice outlet in play when we play the Scholar. And we also have 2 more copies in the sideboard. Next up we have 3 copies of Voice of Resurgence, a 2-mana 2/2 elemental. Whenever an opponent casts a spell during our turn, or when Voice of Resurgence dies, we get to make a green and white elemental creature token that has power and toughness equal to the number of creatures we control. So Voice is pretty similar to cards like Doom Traveler and Blisterpod, in that it provides a creature that we can sacrifice that still leaves behind an extra body, so it's pretty synergistic in our deck. But Voice can also be very good against blue controlling decks that like to play at instant speed in our turn, since whenever they do cast a spell in our turn, we get to make an elemental token, and those tokens can get very big in our deck since we're making a lot of creatures. Next up we have 2 copies of Abzan Ascendancy, a 3-mana enchantment. When the Ascendancy enters the battlefield, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control, so it kind of helps with our go wide beatdown plan. And whenever a non-token creature we control dies, we get to make a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying, so this is another incentive for sacrificing our creatures. Then we have 3 copies of Collected Company, a 4-mana instant that lets us take a look at the top 6 cards of our library, and we can reveal up to 2 creature cards with convert mana cost 3 or less and put them on the battlefield, so this can help us look for the missing combo pieces, whether that's a sacrifice outlet like Viscera Seer or Cartel Aristocrat, or maybe something that drains the opponent whenever we sacrifice something like Blood Artist or Cutthroat. There's just a lot of good creatures we can find with it, and most of the time it's going to be at least a 2-for-1. The reason we're only playing 3 copies is because our curve in our deck is quite low, we're not playing a ton of lands, so a 4-drop can be pretty hard to cast, which is why we only have the 3 copies, since we don't want to have too many stuck in our hand. And then last but not least, we have 4 copies of Return to the Ranks, which is a real engine card in the deck. The casting cost is X and double white, but it also has Convoke, so we can tap any number of creatures we control as we cast Return to the Ranks to help us pay for the cost, and white creatures also help us pay for the white casting cost. So that means that we can cast Return to the Ranks for a pretty big amount, as long as we have a few creatures in play, and then we get to return X target creature cards with convert mana cost 2 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. So this lets us return a whole bunch of creatures all at once, where we can then sacrifice them again with a bunch of Blood Artists or Zulaport Cutthroats in play to generate a pretty big advantage. And if we can cast a sizable Return to the Ranks, the game usually ends soon thereafter. Then taking a look at our mana base, we've got quite a few fetch lands. We've got 4 copies of Windswept Heath, 3 Verdants and 3 Marsh Flats, so a total of 10 fetch lands, which can help us get 1 of each Shock Land, Godless Shrine, Overgrown Tomb and Temple Garden, and 1 of each basic land, 1 Forest, 1 Swamp and 1 Plains. Then we also have a total of 4 fast lands, 3 Concealed Courtyard, which enters the battlefield untapped if it's one of our first 3 lands, and 1 Razorverge Thicket. And then we also have a spicy 1 of a Dryad Arbor, which is a forest, but also a creature, so we can search it up with our green fetch lands, and it's also a creature that we can sacrifice with cards like Viscera Seer and Cartel Aristocrat for value, and we can even get it back from the graveyard as well. So it has some neat synergies in our deck, and it's kind of a creature we can search up with our fetch lands if we're flooding out a bit. Then taking a look at our sideboard, we have 4 copies of Path to Exile to get access to some removal in case we need it. We have 2 copies of Burrenton Forge-Tender, which is great against the red sweeper effects, especially Anger of the Gods, and can also be brought in against burn decks. We have 2 additional copies of Tidehollow Sculler against combo and control decks, 3 copies of Qasali Pridemage, which we can use to destroy artifacts or enchantments, and then still get it back with a Return to the Ranks, so it's pretty synergistic in our deck as well. 2 copies of Orzhov Pontiff, which can deal with go wide decks, and we can actually make use of the haunt mechanic in this deck by sacrificing the creature that's haunted, so we can maybe even give creatures -2/-2 in the same turn. And then 2 copies of Stain the Mind, which is another Convoke card that we can use to exile a card from the opponent's deck, so that can be useful against certain combo decks. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the play, and this hand seems okay. Lots of fodder for the Viscera Seers and a Blood Artist, so it's pretty much where we want to be. Just missing a Return to the Ranks, so I think we'll get a Overgrown Tomb here. And then play a Supplier on 1. And mill the Voice of Resurgence and 2 lands, so not ideal, but get another shot at it when we sacrifice a Supplier. Opponent with turn 1 Darksteel Citadel, so could be an affinity deck, although usually don't see them not play anything. Could also be an Ironworks deck. Alright, so we can either play double Viscera Seer or Viscera Seer plus Doom Traveler here. I guess Viscera Seer plus Doom Traveler is fine, but I guess we can attack first. So we'll play the Seer, play Doom Traveler, say go. And Inventor's Fair in 2. Ever-flowing Chalice. Alright. So this just taps to add 1 mana, essentially. So our opponent's on some weird artifact-based deck. Fair enough. And Dryad Arbor is an interesting draw. So we could go Dryad Arbor into Blood Artist. I think we still want to fetch first to get additional black mana. So we'll get a Godless Shrine. And then we get to go Blood Artist into another Viscera Seer. And this is where we attack first, and then end of turn we can potentially start scrying to look for a return to the ranks or some other powerful effect. So we definitely want to sacrifice Doom Traveler first, and then perhaps the Stitcher Supplier. And our opponent with an Astral Cornucopia. So this could be the Dice Factory deck, I think it's called, that tries to generate a ton of mana through these types of effects, and then tries to cast some huge Ugin or some Eldrazi. So it's basically a ramp deck. We'll sacrifice Doom Traveler, get to drain our opponents, make a token and scry one. And yep, perfect. Return to the ranks on top. So we can just draw the return to the ranks. We get to play Dryad Arbor, and now we have to figure out the optimal sequence, which is pretty tricky to figure out here. I guess we probably want to start by sacrificing the Supplier to see what ends up in our graveyard here. Drain the opponents. Could have also attacked first, but we probably want to end up tapping some number of creatures to pay for the convoke cost. And we milled another Blood Artist, Viscera Seer. So I don't think we'll need another Blisterpod. So right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 creatures we can get back. So we can just convoke for almost the full amount here. That seems fine. And we can tap the Dryad Arbor for convoke, which is neat. Alright, so get all those back. Supplier triggers again. Mill some more creatures. And we can still attack for 1 with our spirits. And then we have to figure out if we can kill our opponent here, which is very much possible, since now we have 2 Blood Artists in play. So we're just going to go through the motions and figure out if we get there. So sacrifice Doom Traveler, drain the opponent for 2, make a token, and yeah, I'm pretty sure we can get there. And our opponent scoops it up. Alright, so turn 4 kill here, pretty impressive. Let's go to sideboarding. So against this kind of artifact-based ramp deck, I'm not even sure if we want Qasali Pridemage, since killing 1 artifact might not slow the opponent down by much, but I think I do like the inclusion of Tidehollow Sculler, although I guess our opponent might be bringing in some graveyard hate, in which case the Pridemage is going to be fine. So I guess Pridemage is okay. Then I think I'll cut 1 Aristocrat and maybe shave a Cutthroat here or there, and just shave some of the weaker creatures we have in general, so maybe a Blisterpod can go. I guess we'll cut another Cutthroat, and maybe cut a Voice of Resurgence. Again, sideboarding with this deck can be pretty tricky, since you don't want to dilute the deck too much. So I think we'll try this. Don't think we need Path to Exile, and I don't even know what we should name with Stay in the Mind. And how about this hand? Yeah, this hand seems pretty excellent. We've got all the pieces we need, plus Pridemage for interaction. And even found a second Pridemage. So I think we run out Doom Traveler first, since the Viscera Seer is more valuable in case they can interact with it. And yep, there's Core Tapper, that's the scary card in their deck that kind of pays them off for playing all those charge cards. So they can sacrifice a Core Tapper to put 2 charge counters on Cornucopia, so it turns it into a ramp 2 effect. So here we can play Viscera Seer plus Doom Traveler, or we can play Pridemage, but I kind of want to keep the Pridemage a surprise, so we can play and activate next turn. The upside of playing Pridemage is that we get the Exalted trigger, so we could attack for 2. I think I would rather play Viscera Seer and another Doom Traveler though, as to not show the opponent we have the Pridemage, since that might change their play. So we'll play a fetch land, attack for 1. And then what fetch land do we get? It's either Overgrown Tomb or Temple Garden. I guess Temple Garden for now. Play Doom Traveler number 2. And Viscera Seer. Say go. And then next turn we can run out Pridemage. Alright, so opponent's putting 1 charge counter on Cornucopia. So if they were to sacrifice it, this could make 3 mana. Chalice for 1. And another Core Tapper. Alright, so opponent could make a ton of mana next turn. Let's say they tap them both. Then this is 4, 5, 6. Sacrifice 7, 8. Sacrifice 9, 10. So yeah, our opponent could cast something giant next turn. But we do have Pridemage to slow that down a little bit. So we'll attack with everyone. And then I think we want to keep the Pridemage to destroy one of the mana generators instead of one of the Core Tappers, since otherwise they can just sacrifice Core Tapper in response, which would not be great for us. And we'll fetch for probably Overgrown Tomb just to make sure we have all the mana we need. Not sure if our life total matters a ton in this matchup. Run out Pridemage. And here I'm not sure about the sequencing. It's probably fine to say go and wait for the opponent to make a move first. We do give them potentially 1 extra mana this way. And board the Weatherlight. Alright, that's pretty neat. Can help them find maybe their payoff card or some other artifact. Finds Ensnaring Bridge, but Ensnaring Bridge doesn't actually stop us since we can still win through the use of Blood Artist triggers. So Ensnaring Bridge is actually fine. Don't even think we need to sacrifice our Pridemage to destroy the bridge. I think I would rather just destroy both of the mana generators. I know our opponent has an Academy Runes that can be used to return them. So the question is, how much does destroying one of their artifacts really accomplish? But it probably does enough. So I'll destroy the Cornucopia. The other option would be to just go after the Core Tappers. But again, our opponent could get value out of those, so again we'll attack with everyone. And then play another Pridemage. And now it might be correct to destroy the Chalice right away so they can't use the mana. And leave them with no mana generators essentially. And force them to maybe use Academy Runes if they don't have another one of those in hand. And our opponent scoops it up. So end of turn we were probably going to look for something like a Blood Artist, but then we had Return to the Ranks to get back at least 2 Qasali Pridemages, maybe even Doom Traveler or 2, and accumulate quite a bit of value. Voice of Resurgence would also be pretty nice since the token would be huge, and we could eventually destroy the bridge. So I think this game was probably in hand, but maybe a premature concession from the opponent. So on to the next one. Alright, we're on the play. And this is a pretty land-heavy draw, but we do have a company, which kind of makes up for it. So I think we'll keep... And then we don't really want to get a basic forest for Blisterpod, otherwise we're unable to cast Aristocrat on 2. And we'll use the Marsh Flats in case we want to fetch basic forest or plains with the Windswept Heath. And then next turn we can go Swamp into Cartel Aristocrat. Turn 1 Verdant gets a Swamp for an Inquisition, which will get our Cartel Aristocrat. Alright, so we don't have a ton of cards left in hand, sadly, but Company's gonna have to make up for it. And Thicket was not a good draw. Alright, let's attack for 1. And play a tapped Godless Shrine for now. And we'll probably play the Thicket next turn. We probably have enough lands in hand where the drawback of Thicket is not gonna come up. Alright, found a Satyr Wayfinder, which is okay, I guess, but again, we don't really need more lands. So ideally it just puts 4 valuable creatures in our graveyard. So let's see what we get. And yeah, we got 4 creatures, so I guess I got what I asked for. So now a Return to the Ranks in the future is going to be pretty spicy. And I think I'll still play the Thicket here, just in case. Since we might want to go Collected Company into Return to the Ranks, getting back 5 creatures. And then we need all the lands we can get. Opponent with Abrupt Decay on our Wayfinder end of turn. Don't mind seeing that. And a Dark Confidence. Our opponents could be on Junt or just black-green mid-range. So we will get to resolve our Collected Company at least. Drawing more lands is not where we want to be. I guess the Windswept Heath can also fetch a Dryad Arbor at some point. So let's attack for 1, try and pressure the opponent's life total as much as possible to punish them for the Dark Confidant. And I guess we'll play the Swamp for now, even though we could do the Dryad Arbor trick. Our opponent's probably not attacking anyways with the Dark Confidant into our company. Reveals Liliana of the Veil. So they take 3, and Liliana's not too effective against us, since we already emptied our hand of all relevant cards. And sacrificing a creature is pretty trivial. So despite a somewhat weak start from us, we might still have a chance here, especially for opponents taking a lot of damage, and we can find a Blood Artist and a Sacrifice outlet with the company. So there's Liliana, and definitely want to respond to the minus ability in case we find a Blood Artist. And instead we find Viscera Seer, Supplier, Doom Traveler, Wayfinder. So we definitely want Viscera Seer. And then I guess we'll go with the Doom Traveler that provides 2 bodies. Since our graveyard's already pretty full, so I don't think we need the Supplier or the Wayfinder. And then we can sacrifice the Blisterpod. And then the question is, do we want to sacrifice Doom Traveler end of turn to improve our draw step? I think we do. And the flyer can also finish off Liliana for whatever that's worth. Since if we can find a return to the ranks right now, we probably win the game. Bottom the land. So do we keep sacrificing here? Could sacrifice the Eldrazi. Think we'll just take our draw step for now. Find another land. So we can get a Dryad Arbor with the Windswept Heath. And we don't really care about Liliana. And we kind of like the fact our opponent has Dark Confidant in play. Unless they can find a Scavenging Ooze. In that case, we're gonna regret leaving the Dark Confidant in play. So I think we're just attacking our opponent with a Spirit down to 8. Instead of finishing off Liliana. And say go. And our opponent reveals Tarmogoyf down to 6. So they might end up using a removal spell on their own Confidant. Unless they have a Scavenging Ooze here. So our opponent pluses, will discard. Opponent discards Thoughtseize. And a second Liliana, fair enough. Pluses again. And we'll discard another land. Confident attacks, we'll take it. And a pretty big Tarmogoyf. I guess blocking and sacrificing on Goyf is better. Alright, so I think our plan is to sacrifice Windswept Heath to get Dryad Arbor, and then just take a normal draw step and attack the opponent for 1 with our Spirit, and then we can block Tarmogoyf and sacrifice with the Viscera Seer to scry for our next turn, and then hope they find some expensive cards with their Confidant. So take Dryad Arbor, draw, and Blood Artist to draw, so I think we now have lethal. So we can attack our opponents with everyone except Viscera Seer. They'll take at least 3, we'll lose a creature, and then we can go sack, 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 and they're dead. So yeah, our opponent should be dead on board now. Attack our opponent, attack our opponents, attack our opponents. Opponent blocks Dryad Arbor. I guess we can scry here for whatever that's worth. Drain the opponent for 1. Doom Traveler's fine, but it's not gonna matter since their opponent falls to 3. And then sacrifice, drain the opponent for 1. Sacrifice, drain the opponent for 1. And then we can sacrifice Viscera Seer itself. And deal the last point. Alright, so managed to drain out Jund. How do we want to sideboard? What kind of graveyard hate is the opponent going to bring? They already have quite a few Scavenging Oozes, those are the main concern. Could bring in Path to Exile as kind of an answer to those. I don't think we want anything else in particular. Could also not change anything, but I think Path is going to be serviceable. And then what do we take out? I don't love Sculler since the opponent's going to have a ton of removal already. So it's going to be pretty easy for them to just kill the Sculler and then get their card back. And then I'm just going to shave a Blisterpod and a Cutthroat and call it a day. No land, so we'll go to 6. Alright, this is better. We're currently missing black mana for Suppliers, but this will work. So keep that on top. Turn 1 Inquisition. Can either go after the Wayfinder or the Supplier. I guess I'll go with the Wayfinder given that we don't have black mana, but we did scry to the top. Opponent does go for Supplier anyway. I think we want to get a Godless Shrine here. Make sure we have double white for Return to the Ranks. Play Supplier and see what we can find. Alright, found Viscera Seer, Wayfinder as far as creatures go. And this time around we would like to find a land with a Wayfinder, since we do want to cast a company eventually. Could get sniped by a Thoughtseize or by Liliana. As we see another Inquisition, go after the Wayfinder. Alright, Blood Artist, not the worst. Let's attack for 1 and play the Artist. And hope to dodge Liliana, which could be pretty effective here. Although I imagine our opponent might have boarded out Liliana, since she's usually not very effective in the matchup. Since the -2 is pretty much useless. So we would not like to see Scavenging Ooze now. And there's Scavenging Ooze. Alright, at least our opponent's stuck on 2 lands. So they'll get limited use out of it. So now it's another Blood Artist. And I think we're fine playing defense. This is also better in case they do have Liliana and want to minus next turn, we can just sack the Supplier. And the more green mana our opponent finds, the worse this will get. As long as they only have the Overgrown Tomb, we might be okay. So we'll take 2 for now. Might be 3 if they decide to activate. They don't. And there's a Tarmogoyf, which is pretty giant. Alright, let's try and find a land. Oof, not the right one, sadly. Still gonna play it. Say go. And then we might block the Tarmogoyf with the Supplier here. Alright, so hopefully we get Resolve Company next turn. Liliana the Last Hope would also be a disaster. There's a lot of cards that are pretty bad for us here. All things considered. Kolaghan's Command as well. Could make us discard. Yep. Alright, it's too bad. So now we're left with nothing. Think I block. So our best draw here would be Return to the Ranks or another company. Instead an Overgrown Tomb, could have used you last turn. Don't have a ton of time to find an answer, since now the opponent can also double activate Ooze if they want to. So Return to the Ranks is going to be less effective if we do find it. And yep, there's Liliana the Last Hope, which can pick off for 1 toughness creatures 1 by 1. Opponent had a pretty good draw. They were stuck on 2 lands for a while, but didn't really hurt them too much. And yeah, now we're pretty much dead. I guess we'll play the Temple Garden in case we top deck Return to the Ranks and we can pay for 1 more. But I don't see ourselves winning this one. Opponent's gonna start eating with Scavenging Ooze. Exiles our 2 Drain creatures, Cutthroat and Blood Artist. Can attack us for 8. And we have 1 turn to top deck. And a Dark Confidant. And what do we draw? Well, that's the card we needed, so we can return for 4. What does that do for us? There's Blood Artist, Viscera Seer, and then we want to get something that provides multiple bodies, which we don't have, and probably Satyr Wayfinder over Supplier. And that's all we can get. But it might not be enough here. We'll see. Alright, so we get a Satyr Wayfinder trigger, which finds a land, which we might as well play. I guess this can't get a Dryad Arbor, but it's still okay. So we're not really close to killing our opponent here with Blood Artist triggers. So we probably just have to say go. And then hope they hit something expensive. Found a Kolaghan's Command. Of course, the issue here is that they still have Liliana to take out one of our creatures. And now a Kolaghan's Command in hand. So yeah, I don't think we can afford to sacrifice any other creatures here since we need all our blockers. So I'll sacrifice Viscera Seer to itself. Drain the opponent for 2. And then we're pretty much looking for another return to the ranks. Stitcher Supplier goes on the bottom. Scavenging Ooze eats Viscera Seer. But there's another one in the graveyard if we need it. Goyf, Ooze and Dark Confidant all attack. And get 4 Blood Artist triggers. We could have also tried to trade Wayfinder for Dark Confidant to get additional Blood Artist triggers. Maybe that was the correct play here. But our opponent can still gain some life with Scavenging Ooze. And we're just gonna untap and hope to draw another return to the ranks. Doom Traveler's probably not gonna do it. And our opponent's even gonna draw step Kolaghan's Commandus. And with the Scavenging Ooze, they can still gain life in their upkeep in response to the Dark Confidant trigger, so they don't die. Alright, so despite the timely return to ranks, it was still not good enough, and our opponent kind of dismantled us. So the only way we can win is if our opponent doesn't gain life in response with Scavenging Ooze and flips a Bloodbraid Elf. But our opponent knows what's up and reveals Anger of the Gods, all the way down to 2 life, and now we're dead. Alright, so very close game in the end. How do we want to sideboard? Think we keep things as is. I think I like the path. Had we been able to deal with Ooze or Tarmogoyf, then things would have been quite a bit better for us. And I don't think I like the discard, even though it's one of the few ways we can maybe snipe something like Liliana or Anger of the Gods out of their hand. It's also an artifact that grows Tarmogoyf, which is kind of a nombo. So I think we'll just try this again. Would like to be on the play. And this is a keeper. Oof, and our opponent leads with Leyline of the Void. And we did not bring in our Qasali Pridemages since we didn't really expect Leyline. Definitely a card Junt can have, but there's so many possible graveyard cards they could have that it's difficult to predict which one they're going to end up with. Well, that kind of shuts off a big part of our deck. So now we have to win through fair beatdown. It's definitely possible our opponent kept a sketchy hand just because it had Leyline. So they might not have a functional draw. So we'll lead with Doom Traveler. And a major problem here is that Leyline means that Zulaport Cutthroat and Blood Artist are not going to trigger when a creature dies on our part, since it's going to get exiled instead, so it doesn't count as technically dying. And Fatal Push on Doom Traveler, don't even get our Spirit token. Alright, let's play the Cutthroat. Say go. And there's a Grim Lavamancer. Might have to path that one, but we don't really want to give our opponent an extra land for now. And there's a Voice, which is also affected by a Leyline. So let's attack for 1. Think we just play Voice anyway here. And if our opponent goes fetch land, activate Grim Lavamancer, we're gonna be sad. But they have been stuck on 1 land. And there's a second Blackleaf Cliff, so still not enough food for the Lavamancer at least. But a Bolt is just gonna take out Voice of Resurgence, not leaving behind anything. Yeah, Leyline of the Void is quite a beating against us. And it's kind of the fault of the Vengevine deck that people are playing all these Leylines nowadays. So let's play Wayfinder. Try and find a land. Play Doom Traveler, say go. And there's Liliana the Last Hope. Alright, I think we can probably concede now. Don't really see how we can still win this game. Alright, so that's unfortunate. Would have liked to have a more interactive game 3 here, but Leyline of the Void kind of shuts down our entire deck. So on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, and this hand seems quite good. We've got all the pieces we need, except for maybe a sacrifice outlet, but we've got company to help us. And turn 1 Faithless Looting could be any number of graveyard-based decks. Discards double Gristlebrand. Alright, so I guess our opponent's on the Grishelbrand deck. So if they have a turn 2 Goyr's Vengeance, then we're probably dead. So hopefully that doesn't happen. Opponent does not have a second land, which is either a good sign that they're not going to do much for the rest of the game, or a bad sign that they have Vengeance in hand and they're just one land away from casting it. Either way, we're going to continue our game plan as if nothing happened. Get in for 1 and play a voice. Alright, opponent still does nothing, so we'll attack for 3, play Cutthroat. Could also fetch a Dryad Arbor end of turn here, alongside the Cutthroat. That might be okay. I guess so. Alright, opponent still doesn't have a second land, but it feels like this is a ticking time bomb. So let's get our Dryad Arbor. Opponent has to discard to hand size, which can sometimes be an advantage in the Grishelbrand deck. And they weren't even interested in casting the Lightning Axe, which is interesting. So we get to attack for 4, and then still have access to Collected Company. And I think we'll say go. Our opponent could also have a number of Simian Spirit Guides in hand to make red mana, but that doesn't make black mana for Glorious Vengeance. So let's fetch a swamp, cast Company, and see what we can find. So probably looking at Voice of Resurgence, and I'm guessing either Doom Traveler or Supplier. I guess I'll go with Supplier in case we top deck, return to the ranks, and see what we can put in our graveyard. Alright, just an Abzan Ascendancy, no creatures, so not the best. Opponent discards a Night's Whisper and Blood Artist to draw, so if we had a sacrifice outlet we would probably win here. But it's still a decent draw. And then we'll attack with everyone. And then we're just waiting for a Viscera Seer or a Cartel Aristocrat. But I guess next turn we're also just attacking for lethal. So just need to dodge that black source, and then we might be okay. Alright, I guess they have a Nourishing Shoal to gain themselves a bit of life, so the game's not over yet. So your opponent exiling a Worldspine Worm there to gain 11 life. Another land is not what we need. Let's get in there. And I guess we do have a 2-turn clock here. So our opponent needs to either kill us or find a way to gain more life or to interact. And our opponent scoops it up. Alright, so not the most interactive game from the opponent's perspective. But we were able to assemble quite a board, just one sacrifice outlet away from comboing off. So in this matchup we definitely want our Tidehollow Scullers and our Stay in the Mines. Could also make a case for Path to Exile, since it can exile a worm in response to a Through the Breach, or exile Gristlebrand before he gets to connect. But they can be kind of conditional. I think we'll still bring them in, but if we don't have room then we might end up only bringing in a handful. Then what do we take out? Our opponent's probably going to have something like Anger of the Gods. They might even have Blood Moon we need to be worried about. I think we'll cut the Blisterpods. I don't think Voice is going to be great most of the time. Can probably shave a Cutthroat. Opponent might also have a bit of Graveyard Hate, in which case we might need Qasali Pridemages. And I guess Burrenton Forge-Tender could also be useful against Anger of the Gods specifically, but maybe it's a bit narrow. So maybe too many cards we're interested in bringing in, and we don't exactly know what to take out, which risks diluting the deck too much. So I'll cut another Cutthroat, take out Voice. I guess we'll just bring in 3 Path to Exiles instead of 4. So not entirely sure this is correct. Could be that we want the Forge-Tender, could be that we want Pridemage just in case. Could be that we want more or fewer paths, but this seems okay. Alright, we're on the draw, and this hand, while unexciting, is probably keepable. I think we have enough pieces here where we're just a Blood Artist away from doing something powerful. Opponent with turn 1 looting again. Let's see if they get to play a second land this game. And the Stain the Mind we brought in, we can kind of name whatever card we think is the most scary. Could be that we name Glorious Vengeance if they discard a Gristlebrand. Could be we name Through the Breach if we think they might be on the Through the Breach plan. Or we could just name one of the fatties. Alright, we found our Blood Artist, which is kind of what we were looking for. So let's get a Godless Shrine. I guess what we can do with this hand is currently cast our Cartel Aristocrat, since we don't have another black or white source, but the Wayfinders can probably help us find a land. That lets us cast the Aristocrat. Opponent Exile Simian Spirit Guide to cast a Night's Whisper. So our opponent seems to be keeping pretty land-light hands, as they miss another second land drop, which is pretty painful. I think we're fine playing the Cartel Aristocrat here, at the cost of 2 life, just to get her down sooner, and also attacks for more damage. And then next turn we can go Wayfinder, plus maybe Dryad Arbor. Another looting. Discards Glorious Vengeance, Night's Whisper, so still no Gristlebrands in the graveyard we need to be worried about, but they did find a second land eventually. Alright, another Doom Traveler's not bad. So I guess I'm into Wayfinder plus Doom Traveler here, and then next turn we'll drop a Blood Artist and maybe start draining. And hope to dodge something like an Anger of the Gods. I think I'll take the basic planes. Put Blood Artist in the graveyard and a return to the ranks. So let's attack for 3. And I don't think we need to keep up white mana to represent Path to Exile here. I'll just run out the Traveler, since they're still pretty far away from Through the Breach and they don't have any creature for Glorious Vengeance, so I imagine that we're safe this turn. Another Night's Whisper, that's fine. And by getting basic planes we also have a bit of insurance in case of a Blood Moon, although I don't expect our opponent to bring it in against us. Alright, so we can definitely do some work now. Get to play Wayfinder into Blood Artists, and do not find any lands, but that's okay. Stain the Mind, Path, double Artist, go to the graveyard. We'll play Blood Artists. So we're attacking for 5 here, and then can we drain our opponent out? Let's do some quick math. Our opponent's at 7. So 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, dead. Yes. So as long as our opponent doesn't have a Nourishing Shoal, which they could have, to gain life, since if we go all in trying to kill our opponent and they just Nourishing Shoal, then we kind of give up our entire board. So what we probably should do is just let them untap. And if they try to kill us, we just sacrifice everything. But as long as they're not really dealing with what we have going on, there's no real reason to do anything, since we can just sacrifice everything at instant speed. But we do technically have lethal in play, and our opponent scoops it up. Alright, I guess I didn't have the Nourishing Shoal, and next turn we would have just attacked them, maybe down to 1, and then we probably can afford to sacrifice 1 creature to just check out if they have the Nourishing Shoal, and if they didn't have it, they were dead. Awesome, I want to thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this gameplay, and as always, have a nice day. I also want to thank all my patrons for supporting the channel, and you can do so yourself as well over at patreon.com/LegenVD, where you get cool rewards for supporting the channel, as well as getting us closer to our goals, where with every goal reached, we will release an additional weekly series. So if you want to see more content, Patreon is the place to go.